Now, today we are having two great women of valor, two precious women that are very dear to my heart, that I've known for many years, and especially Louisa. We've grown in the faith together, and today is just beautiful for us to come together to discuss about a theme that is very painful, a subject that usually when it happens in the life of a victim, the victim either tend to not talk about it or to feel ashamed to talk about it. And even when they come out, sometimes the family may try to also hide the unfortunate events. But because Leadership Excellence for Women by Women is a platform that was created to break the silence, to just uplift anything that is hiding so that people can know the truth and they can be free. They can become who God created them to be. We are coming today on this platform to talk about this subject, which is called Rising from Childhood Victim of Sexual Abuse to Children's Advocate, a deep daughter-mother conversation.
Precious women of valor, precious men of valor, welcome to Leadership Excellence for Women by Women talk show.
Connect, explore, transform, and uplift each other's to reach their limitless possibilities.
When did the domestic violence start in your marriage?
Immediately.
93% of juvenile victims of sexual abuse is by people they know.
Yes.
Before I used to edit on the free software and people paid for that. Then I got better on my paid software, so I got more clients and they offered to pay more.
You don't need to go as far as fighting a woman, beating a woman, diminishing her, insulting her, humiliating her.
Non, on pensait que c'était une Américaine qui allait venir. Donc...
Les gens, dès qu'ils commencent un boulot, c'est fini, hein. C'est jusqu'à la retraite. Tu vois, ils ne cherchent pas à changer de boulot, ils ont peur.
The testimonies, the stories are just amazing.
Comment démystifier certains mythes sur l'augmentation de salaire et la promotion?
Leadership Excellence for Women by Women.
Now, today, I will start first of all with Louisa, our first guest. Louisa Rodriguez is a prolific writer and illustrator with a passion for helping women and girls find their purpose and develop a positive self-image. Louisa aims to find creative ways to teach biblical concepts in an easy-to-understand format. She is also the creator and author of FruitfullyLiving.com, a website dedicated to women and their daughters. Fruitfully Living helps to teach, train, and equip women and girls to come to the full purpose of their calling. She is also the author and illustrator of a Christian fairy tale, A Royal Mission, and the ebook, Preparing Our Daughters for Puberty, a mother-daughter Bible study. Louisa is also the creator of BiblicalWarfare.com, a website for those interested in styling Bible battles and warriors. She is inspired by her own two daughters, beautiful daughters, by the way, self-proclaimed warrior princesses. By God's grace, Louisa lives with her husband and her daughters in beautiful St. Charles, Illinois. Our second guest of today is Pastor Lucy De Leon. That is, in fact, Louisa's mother. Pastor Lucy De Leon is a missionary pastor serving alongside her husband, Louis, to the poor and the needy at the border community of Laredo, Texas. She has a passion to empower underprivileged women with basic trade skills and through the love of Christ, watch them arise and become self-sufficient to give their families a better future, as well as helping them heal from the wounds of their past, giving them the freedom to move forward in life. Lucy and her husband are the co-founder of New Vision Community Church of Laredo, a very active ministry, extremely engaged with the community, managing the first faith-based food bank in Laredo that serves over 1,000 families, the elderly, and local ministries. She also oversees the mission teams that visit the area every month to work at the community center of Ein Gedi, a training farm in the rural areas surrounding the city, and the one that visits the new ministry they have started in Guatemala. Pastor Lucy De Leon lives in Laredo, Texas, with her husband, Luis, and they have 8 children, 17 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchildren. Again, if you just connected with us, our talk show of today will be talking about rising from childhood victim of sexual abuse to children's advocate, a deep daughter-mother conversation. Before we get started, I will have Pastor Lucy and Luisa introduce themselves. We have a little challenge for you today. The 20 people that will share and tag this video and also become friend on Luisa's webpage that is up on this video, and also become friend with Leadership Excellence for Women by Women Facebook page, will receive this beautiful ebook that Luisa wrote that is called Preparing Our Daughters for Poverty, a Mother-Daughter Bible Study. I actually have an ebook and it's beautiful. So you will be a winner should you tag and share to 5 or more of your friends and become friend on the 2 Facebook page that are up on this video. Without further ado, I would like to have Pastor Lucy and Luisa introduce themselves and tell us what type of leaders are you. I will let you decide who wants to start first.
I will go ahead, Mom.
Okay. Well, greetings, everybody, and Mercy, thank you for allowing us this platform to be able to share our stories with other people. As you said, my name is Lucy De Leon, and I'm a missions pastor in Laredo, Texas, serving alongside my husband, Luis. But my passion truly, it is to work with the underprivileged people, especially women. And I am a firm believer that we need to be the true gospel, walking gospel to the people that we encounter. So through our actions and how we can help them become self-sufficient and bring all their talents and God-given gifts out, healing their past, they'll be able to achieve whatever they want in life, no matter what is their background or how they suffer in life. So that's a passion of mine that we're doing here and also in Guatemala.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy. Luisa?
Thank you, Mercy, again for having us here. It really is a privilege and a great opportunity to be talking with you and with my mom. And so, yeah, I'm Luisa Rodriguez. And I think the most important thing I want people to know about me is that I am a Christ follower. And been married for almost 20 years. And I have 2 daughters, one that's 14 and a 9-year-old daughter who's seems like she's going on to 21. But God has gifted me with the ability to write. And I try to use all my experiences and everything that I have lived through and to give my testimony to women and to use it as a tool to help them going through similar struggles. And I am also an illustrator. So I love drawing and painting, especially digital drawing. And I try to use both mediums to reach women. And in the ministry that I have, which is primarily focused on reaching marginalized women in the church and outside the church. And as far as what type of leader am I, and I had mentioned this to you before, but I don't like being in the limelight. I don't like being on camera, and I don't like being on stage. I usually like being behind the scenes. That's where I am most comfortable. And so writing is a great way for me to connect with women in that way.
Well, thank you so much again for the two of us to make time to share with the world what you've been through, what you've learned from that, and how you can advise those that are going through it, or even those that have never been through it, how to make sure that they will never go through this kind of issue. Let's start with you, Louisa. I understand that you were the victim of sexual abuse when you were a child. Would you mind sharing a little bit about it so that our audience can understand why protecting kids from sexual predators is so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a first generation immigrant. So I came to the United States when I was really young. So this actually happened in my home country of Guatemala. And I was pretty young, and I know I was pretty young because it was before the first time I came. So Mom, what would you guess my age was? Around 2 years old?
You were between 2 and 3, yeah.
Yeah, so I was pretty young, and I don't know if we lived there or I was just happened to be there. We visited often, but I was in my grandma's house, and it was a pretty big house. We used to call it La Casa Grande in Spanish, which means big house. And there was a part of the house that was kind of separate. It was almost like its own little apartment. It was away from the main area of the house. And there was a young man, I think he was a teenager, and he would take me up to that room, and he would lock the door. And obviously I'm not going to go into detail of exactly what happened, not because I mind talking about it. God has brought me through such a healing process that I actually it doesn't bother me to talk about it. But I know that women that have experienced this, to hear details like that can be re-traumatizing. But it was in that room where he abused me. And I don't know how many times that happens or how many times it did happen. I know it happened at least a couple times, or how often. Like, I was really small, but even now I can still remember very, very, very specific details about it.
Thank you so much, Louisa, for opening up to this. And, when you were talking, it brought so many painful memories to my mind. But before I even get to that, did you tell your mom, Louisa, right away after the sexual abuse? Because 2 years, you could talk.
Yeah, I presume I could talk. I think I could talk. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her for a long, long time. It just, what was interesting about the whole thing, like even as it was happening, is I felt guilty. Like, I remember as a kid, as a child, as this is going on, feeling shame and guilt, even though, I know this is Guatemala, so no one talked about sex, or there wasn't any like predator training. This wasn't even common, I think, in the US back then, but much less in our home country. There was at 2, do you really have a concept of what's right or wrong in that sense? So for me to know automatically that it was wrong, I think that's just your God-given morality that he puts in your heart, to know that there's something about this that doesn't feel right, even though as a child I didn't understand and comprehend it. And I didn't know, I didn't even attribute that to him. Like, I always carried that as my own guilt and shame for years, until obviously much later. So no, it didn't even, I think because of the shame, because I felt like it was wrong, I didn't tell my parents for that reason. I didn't say anything.
Thank you, Louisa. Pastor Lucy, when it happened the first time to your daughter, Louisa, did you notice anything different in her after the traumatic event, especially the first time? Because as a little girl, she must have been in pain. Have you noticed anything different?
No, the only thing I noticed, and maybe we have not even talked to her about it now that she's talking in details, a little bit more details, was that she was afraid of men since she was young. She was afraid of men that she didn't know. And, you know, this young person, this teenager who did this, he used to be an employee of mine. I used to have a floral shop before I immigrated to the United States. Louisa was pretty young. It was 2.5 or maybe 3 years old. Because after that, we moved out of that big house. Yes, at that time we were living in a big house with my mom, but then we moved. And after we moved, this kid still worked for me, but he didn't come to the house anymore. So, you know, no, that's the only thing I noticed. And she took that for many years, that she was shy of any man that she didn't know. She would be kind of afraid.
Thank you, Pastor Lucy and Louisa. Before we go further, I really want to take a pause here. Because like I said, for those of you that just connected, today our talk show is about rising from childhood victim of sexual abuse to children advocates, a deep daughter-mother conversation. While Louisa and Dr. Lucy were talking, I was taking a note, and that's why I call this a deep conversation, because we really want to remove the layers. When Lisa was talking earlier on, she talked about, this is where I want parents, and even, you know, when I say parents, not only mothers, but even fathers, to pay attention to clues, to setting that can favorize, should I say that, to setting that can sexual abuse toward children. Louisa talked about the setting where it happened. It was a big house. When you were talking, Louisa, it took me back to, I think I was about 8 or 9. We were living overseas. And every 2-3 years, my parents will either make us fly to our native country for vacation, or he will rent a big truck and have a driver. My mom and my 5 brothers and sisters, no, 4 at that time, and brothers and sisters will travel by road, crossing 2 countries to go to our country. And it will take us about 2 weeks to get to the main capital. So in each city where we had family members, we will stop for a day or 2. I used to love it. I used to love it. And I remember vividly when you were talking. Now that you were talking, I could see the same setting that happened to me. I was fortunate I did not get raped because I fought. And I think because I was 8 and 9 years, between 8 and 9, number one. Number two, my dad, earlier on, I think since 6 years old, he put my older sister and brother into martial arts. So I do self-defense. I believe these 2 are the things that saved me. But the same thing almost happened to me. What happened? We got to Mali, to one of the cities where my parents had a family member, friends. We were to stay in their house for just a day and then continue our road. So when we got there at night, in the morning, we took a breakfast and everything. And around, I think, 11 a.m., my mom had wanted to go say hello to the other family member in that city. So he asked the children to get ready to go. I was tired and I told her, Mom, I don't feel going. I'm gonna stay. They left me. I thought I was alone in the house. Before I knew it, one of the children of that family friend, they had 4 boys. The second boy, we were the same age. but he was way taller than I. Even as of now, he's really built up. Way taller than I, much more muscles. He came to the room, and I remember I was, laying on the bed. I was in the girls section. It was a big house also. I was laying on bed, and he came, and we just started talking. We were just chatting. It was a normal conversation. But before I knew it, the whole thing, the situation changed within a second. The boy's facial expression changed, and he told me, I'm going to rape you. And he was trying now, when he said it, I just jumped out of bed. So now we start fighting. It was literally fighting. And there was no one else in the house. So had I even screamed, nobody would come. I fought and fought and fought the boy for about 5-10 minutes. And then the instinct, of self-defense kicked in. I just kicked him in his private part. And before he knew it, I just pushed him and rushed out of the room. I stay outside of the house. I literally get out of the whole house, out of the backyard, and run to the main door and sat there for about 2 hours until my mom came back with the rest of the family member.
Wow. And
do you know that I never told my mom?
Yeah.
Ever told my mom. Just like Louisa said, even though I was only 8, I felt like, why did this boy do that to me? Could it be that I did something that prompted him to think like he could turn the situation like this? Never said a word. Even as of now, my mom never knew that. She doesn't know.
It's a common pattern, I think, from many women that I've talked to about this. I think it's the common pattern of shame, guilt, and silence.
Yeah.
And I know we'll get to this more as the conversation goes in, but that's why parents have to be intentional with their children.
Exactly. So the reason why I want us to go deeper into this first part is, number one, parents, pay attention. In any setting where you find yourself in a big house, make sure children are by your side. Do leave them in area where there is no one in the house, especially if it's a strange or a different setting. It can even be your own house. If you know that there are strangers in your house, make sure that your children don't stay by themselves. Number two, just like you said, this was a teenager. In my case, he wasn't even a teenager. Mm-hmm. He was only 8. And think about it, Pastor Lucy and Louisa, even our viewer. This happened to Louisa, should we say about 20 years ago or more?
No.
Yeah, 40. 40 years, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mine is the same thing. It was about 39 years ago. Think about now with the evolving of internet technology. Children are being more and more exposed to things that are not supposed to be exposed, which means they are being more aware of things that are supposed to be sacred, taboo for a little child. But more and more children are being exposed to it.
Yes.
Many children are being exposed to pornography. We gotta talk about this today. Few months ago, I stumbled into this video of this aunt. She's an aunt in Africa, in Ivory Coast. She came on the video and she was weeping about her little nephew who was only, I believe, 6 years old, that was being sodomized by his classmate, not even naturally sodomized. They use bottle, Coca-Cola bottle, to sodomize the little boy.
Oh.
These are classmates of his, not really a real classmate. It was, I think, summer, and his mom has wanted him to take some summer classes. So she will drop the boy every morning. And then she noticed that the boy was becoming more and more quiet. Just like Louisa said, she was shy. This is another clue to parents. If you have a very babbling child and all of a sudden the child is starting to become shy, that is a second clue for you to pause and wonder what is going on. Same thing happened to that little boy, and his mom asked him. He did not open up to the mom, but he was the auntie. And the auntie, right away when her nephew came to see her at the hospital, that something was wrong with her little nephew. So she made sure to ask the mom to go do an errand. Then she pulled the little boy to her, and she started, sweet talking him. What happened to you, my angel? What is going on? Then the boy was like, I cannot talk, I'm afraid. So it took a lot of effort from the auntie to make the boy to open up. Yes. To that she doesn't want to go to school. He's been crying every morning that he doesn't want to go to school, but the mom will force him. Clue. If your child loves to go somewhere or to be with an adult or somebody, and all of a sudden that same child doesn't want to get close to them, pay attention. Don't just think like the child is acting up. Sometimes we know our children act up, but please, parents, before we make the conclusion, let's dig deeper. If we are not able to get the word out of them, and you know that, let's say you have a sister or a brother that the child is close to, try to ask that person to try to maybe prompt the child to talk. But don't just assume and let it go. Please, parents, let's not do that. We have to be very vigilant. Children are being exposed. And that, in fact, that little boy, once the thing finally got revealed, the school called the parent of the three boys that were doing that to the boy. One was 9, 10, and 11. And one of the boy, the mom asked him, where did you see this? The boy told the mom, I saw you doing it with your boyfriend when you bring them out to our house at nighttime. Apparently, the mom was sharing the same bedroom with the son. Maybe she didn't have the financial means to rent a bigger place, but she was bringing her boyfriend in the bedroom, having sex with the boyfriend, thinking that the child was sleeping. He was what?
Yeah.
The child just emulated what he saw from the parents. But it's unfortunate because by doing so, he destroyed the life of another little boy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really wanted us to pause so that, the more we will get into the discussion, if there are things that we need to develop more, like clues that we just discussed about, for parents to be aware, please pay attention. Let's go deeper. Pastor Lucy, let me go quickly back to Louisa first.
Sure.
Louisa, how did this traumatic event affect you growing up?
Oh, it affected me in a lot of ways. It's a little bit difficult. My childhood wasn't easy. We have quite the story, and there was a lot of trauma. The sexual abuse is just one part of it. So sometimes it's a little hard. Well, what was, it's a combination of a lot of things. But obviously, as a little kid, it was the shame. But I remember I guess my mom mentioned we had never talked about that before, that I was afraid of being alone with men. But as a kid, I remember, I think I just wanted to focus on playing. It really came to a head for me in my teenage years when I really understood what it was that had happened to me. And I think it was from watching some Oprah Winfrey show about sexual abuse. And this is back when Oprah Winfrey was first starting out. But I remember, like, all of a sudden realizing that I was the one that had been abused, and the rage and the anger that came from it, knowing that I had carried this weight for so many years. And so I dealt with depression in my early teens. I would cut myself often. My dad used to work in a hospital, and he used to like bring home scalpels just to have for like easy cutting crafts, cutting boxes or whatever. But I would use those, you know, to cut things into my knees, into my arms. I contemplated suicide. There was just a lot. It was a lot in my teenage years, early teens, until I came to Christ. And I'd have to say that it took the edge off. Like there's a lot of healing that happened when I first came to Christ, but it was just, there was a lot more healing that would come much later, like almost 15 years later, that would really help me dig deep into the spiritual aspect of what was going on. But the other thing that I realized is that I've gone back and thought through it and processed it. I had an unhealthy view of authority. Like I realized, why did I did not like being controlled. And even if it was a healthy, righteous authority, I did not like submitting myself to that authority. And it was just that, I think that fight or flight instinct that I had developed. So I had an unhealthy view of submission and an unhealthy view of authority. And of course that caused issues in my marriage, even though, you know, my husband is one of the sweetest, most wonderful, loving individuals out there. And, you know, it caused issues there. So that's just some of the baggage that came through it. But it just, I lived with it for decades, really.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Louisa. Pastor Lucy, as her mother, how would you describe your relationship with your daughter, Louisa, while she was growing up? Because I'm sure with everything that she was going through, even the suicidal tendency, cutting herself, how was your relationship with her?
Louisa was always, since she was little, she was very, very calm. They used to call her Peace when she was little, because she would be obedient and quiet. But, you know, as she grew up in her years, she was always obedient, but she was hard-headed, always. Like the authority thing was an issue for her, but I think she'll fight herself and she'll go and obey. But as she became a teenager, our relationship became very hard, you know, and as parents, we make a lot of mistakes, and I have my load of mistakes on my back that God has healed me from. And I carry my kids through a lot through my mistakes, because we'll talk about later about the abuse I endure myself. But I think things tend to repeat itself. And it was very hard. We had a very hard relationship, even after, you know, she confessed to me and told me she had kept that in her heart. And, you know, it was hard for me to even process that could have happened when she was so young and I didn't even know. It was a lot of healing she needed to do, and our relationship was always severed for many, many years. Even as she got married, she was extremely harsh with me. Our relationship was harsh, but, you know, I was already healed, and I had to give her space. And I had to understand, because I had the same type of relationship with my mom, even worse. But, you know, when abuse is there, it is hard for you, because it is a root that has given fruits that are still there that you have to totally shake off of you. And the day she shook it off, our relationship totally switched.
Wow. We will get to that later on. I would like Louisa to tell us When did you finally reveal to your mom what happened to you while you were a child? And why did you finally make the decision to come out?
Yeah. So I think, well, it was definitely in my teens. And I don't know if I actually told you. I think I told Erwin. Erwin's my brother. And then,
No.
Did I tell you?
In the room. Yeah, you came to my room.
I think I also told Erwin at one point, because I remember, this is what I remember. I remember I was fighting with my brother, and I finally just said something, you don't even know what happened to me. And then maybe after that, I came and told you. I don't remember honestly when I told you, but it was just at some point then in my early teen years when all of this was kind of swirling in my mind, when I finally said something. And for my part,
why that day did you decide to let it out? Because it seems like it happened.
Yeah, like I said, I don't remember when I told my mom specifically. I remember saying something to my brother. I was just angry. I had so much rage, really. Rage, I think, is the best word to explain it. Mm-hmm. And I had this rage towards my mother for the longest time. Like, I held her responsible. Like, in my heart, I held her absolutely and utterly responsible for what happened to them. Like I said, it would take, obviously we have a great relationship now, but at the time I just, and I wouldn't be surprised, knowing my frame of mind, that if I told her, it wasn't out of a desire to, like, Mom, you know, help me. It was probably me wanting to accuse her. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the way you took it, but I know me well enough, and I know what I was going through at that stage, that it was probably like, I am going to put this on your lap and I'm going to blame you because you were supposed to protect me.
Thank you, Louisa. Pastor Lucy, Louisa doesn't remember exactly the setting, but I'm sure you, as a mother, that might have been a very shockful situation for you. So could you please tell us what was your reaction when your daughter Louisa told you that she went through sexual abuse as a child? How did you feel? How did you react?
Yeah, you know what? I remember vividly when she came. We used to live in Palatine, Illinois, and she came into my room, and she said she needed to tell me something because I needed to know. And then she broke in tears and she started shouting and telling me, you know, what happened, that why did I leave her alone? Was I not there when this happened? You know, I have no, when a child comes to you, it's not a way to defend yourself and say, oh, I'm sorry. No, you know, things happen because the enemy plans to destroy futures. And with Christ with me, I was able to take the blame, but at the same time, do not acquire and say, I am fully guilty for what happened. Because, you know, we live in a big house. We had a lot of people. Guatemala, that's the setting you live in. I was a very young mom. Luisa was born when I was 16 years old. So at this time I was about 18, and, you know, we had people, employees that we trusted, and Luisa moved freely around the house and went everywhere. The kids did. So for me to remember, but in that moment, my desire as a human being, it would have been, you know, I'm going to kill whoever did this to you, because and the moment she told me, you know, so many people came into my mind, blah, blah, blah. Who could this be? And because I know people who hurt my kids as children in other ways. And it was the least of the people or the persons that, when she told me that it was this young man, I finally went blank, because, you know, this kid got shot. He got killed.
Wow.
He got killed. When I was already in the United States, they told me, oh, one day my mom called me and she said, you know, Diego, he got killed by the gangs in the neighborhood where she used to live. I never knew, I said, okay, I'm sorry, tell her mom, I'm so sorry, tell his mom. But I never thought, but putting two and two together now as Christ is in me, I thought, okay, God took care of that. He's not there for me to come and pull a gun on him, because that was my idea. I'll go and kill whoever did this to my daughter. But God took care of that for me. Not that I wish that for him. I wish he would have known Christ and changed his ways. But I was able to release him that night and forgive him on my own. And I think Luisa did many years later. But that was my reaction. I held her. She fought me back because she saw me as an enemy at that moment. I was guilty of not taking care of her. But I didn't take it personally. I knew my job was just to be a mom and love her regardless, and know that God was gonna take care of her. And I prayed, and it took a few years, but God took care of that.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy and Luisa, for opening up to that painful moment. Then after that day, this question is for the two of you. Did you both talk more about it after that day? Or was it just like a one-time talk and that's it?
I don't think we really, we had no relationship. Like, it was almost non-existent, at least from my end. And I had no interest really in talking about it with her at that time. Obviously, it was my mom and my dad who helped me, 15 years later to break through from it. So we've talked about it since then. But as a teenager, maybe it would come up in fights. But other than that, to talk about it, I don't think so. No.
Pastor Lucy, do you have anything to say?
No, it was almost, that doesn't mean that Luisa was respectful either, even though she was hard-headed and she had her own pain. As a child, I have to say that she has always been very responsible to be a good daughter to her parents. And regardless of her pain, she was still loving in her way. But there were things that, I couldn't even say some things because she would blow up on me. So I kept a relationship to keep the peace with her and be able to keep a relationship, even though she was married already. You got married throughout those years. But no, we couldn't talk. And one or two times after, when I went through my own healing, I tried to talk to her, but Luisa wasn't open at that time in the way she was taught in her, ministry that she was going to. This was something that was not discussed, so she was not open for that. But God did the work in her heart. And like she says, 15 years later, my husband and I were the ones who led her to be free in Christ.
Wow. Thank you so much. Let's talk now about the healing process and the reconciliation of the mother-daughter. Could you please explain to us how it happened?
Yeah,
I think I would let Luisa go first because God spoke to her. I prayed. I wanted so much to have a relationship with my daughter. She's my oldest daughter. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted that relationship because she was always protective of Luisa and I. But in a way, it was not a relationship. So I'm going to let Luisa address that first, how God has spoken to her heart.
So I want to go back a little bit, and mostly for the sake and the benefit of parents watching, especially parents of kids going through this. So I was angry and I would lash out. And yes, there were those hot button issues that would get me to just, go crazy. But I remember a lot of some of the things that I was doing, like the cutting, right? So, and let me preface this to say that I want to share from the perspective as a teenage kid. being on the other side, understanding my mom's story, understanding what she went through, understanding she never had a model of what it was to be a parent or a mother. Like she never had that kind of loving, nurturing, mothering relationship. And only now in my adulthood did I recognize the love that my mom had for me, even though maybe she didn't show it in traditional kind of way. So I want to preface that because I don't want people to, to judge her based on my comments coming up. But when I started cutting myself, I remember her, it was a cry for help. What I wanted was for my mom to say, you know what, let's take you to a counselor. Let's take you to a therapist. You need help. Let's go do this. That's what I wanted. But I was too prideful to say that's what I need or that's what I want. So when she saw my cuts for the first time, like she made a comment almost like as if, why are you trying to be rebellious? I don't remember what she said exactly, but the response was she didn't understand that I was crying out for help. Mm-hmm. Like she just kind of took it as me being rebellious or just doing dumb things or whatever. And I think many times, and I kind of seen this pattern and just from women that I have talked to that have been through kind of similar things, when there's that change in attitude because you're being affected by this, parents tend to misinterpret that as just plain old rebellion. Yeah. And they want to treat it with discipline or with, grounding or by yelling at you or whatever it may be. You kind of mentioned this before, Mercy, is when you see that change in your child, when your child starts acting out, you have to just stop. There's something going on here, and it might take you a while to dig deep because for whatever reason, the child may not want to talk. Mm-hmm. And even if it means bringing somebody else in that can talk to that child, that can, you have to keep digging into that to find out what's really going on. And the worst thing I think that you can do as a parent is to treat it as just rebellion, because that child is crying out for help and now you're just ignoring that cry, and it just creates a vicious cycle of between the two of you. So I wasn't like I said, when I came to Christ, there's a lot happened. Like I changed a lot, even physically. Like if you look at my before Christ pictures and my after Christ pictures, I changed physically a lot, because one of the ways that I dealt with my anger and my pain is through music. And so I was into the heavy metal, goth, dark years. I was expressing my pain outwardly. Mm-hmm. So, there was a lot that happened when I first came to Christ, but there's something about sexual abuse, and I don't remember the scripture per se, but I think it's in Corinthians somewhere where it talks about fornication. It's it's like a different type of sin. It's like a sin against your own body. And there's something spiritual that happened that is so deep, and that's what is so hard for anyone that has experienced it to kind of break free from that. And even though I was a Christian, I was a little bit more of a knowledge-based Christian. So I love studying my Bible, and I could, do the whole doctrine thing. And we went to the same church, Mercy. So, remember, I love that kind of thing of just learning and very academic-based type of learning of the Bible. And by this point, my parents, they were Christian. So we didn't talk about this earlier, Mom, but when I was a kid, my parents were not Christians. They became Christians later on. so my path into Christianhood was very different from my parents. So mine was very academic, and they dealt more with spiritual things. And for the longest time, I would just ignore, you know, if my mom tried to talk to me about some spiritually deep-seated issues, I would just like, there she goes. You know, I would just really, I didn't really respect that, that part of their ministry. And it wasn't until a really good friend of mine who has a prophetic gifting, who came and said to me, because, you know, this is how God works, right? You need to apologize to your parents. And I remember sitting there and listening to her, and at the time she wasn't really a friend. I was part of a volunteer program, and she was one of my clients. But so she didn't know anything about me, but I think the way that God got her to the point, you know, he knew me well enough that he showed her stuff about me that there's no way she could possibly know. And she didn't speak English. She didn't know how to use a computer. So I know she couldn't have Googled it or looked all of this stuff up. She just, you know, she just told me stuff that, like, what my house looked like, and she'd never been to my house. Just like, it was just crazy, insane things. And that got my attention. Said, okay, I need to pay attention. And then after that, it's when she said, you need to apologize to your parents, because you think you're smarter than them, and you're not. And you think, you know, you think you're a better Christian, but you're not. And so it was that process when I finally humbled myself to my parents and said, you know, I'm sorry. And then this happened in the Woodbridge house, where they came over, and I said, you know, it wasn't until that moment of just asking my parents for forgiveness. And then they asked me for forgiveness too, you know, and kind of like forgiveness, healing process, that we started having a relationship. Now, I didn't even deal with the abuse part of the spiritual aspect yet, but that was just the point where I actually started having a relationship with, I always kind of had a relationship with my dad, Lewis, with both of my dads. I have a biological father, and my dad, Lewis, is my stepdad, but they're both dads to me. I had a relationship with them. It wasn't them that I hated. It was the anger was towards my mom, but it was then that I really began having a relationship with my mom.
Thank you so much, Louisa. Wow. You know, you talk about so many things here, and I just want to bring one aspect that you touch on before I let Pastor Lucy talk. When you were saying that your mom would approach you spiritually, even that friend of you, this is the main problem that we have, especially in developing world. And when I say developing world, I'm talking about really developed world, not developing. I'm talking about the United States. We think that we know so much. When things happen in the physical realm, subconsciously, many of us refuse to know that anything that happened on earth, before it happened on earth, it has happened in heaven. So in order for you to understand the deep root cause of things, you really have to look at also on that other side, which is the spiritual side of things, because we are spirit. Yes, we are human beings, but we are spirit. So in anything that happened to us, yes, we have psychologists, we have doctors, we have specialists, but let's not also forget about the spiritual aspect of things.
Absolutely.
For you to have that click to make you pause and say, wow, maybe God is trying to say something to me, even though your mom was trying to talk to you, but because you were seeing her as, you know, the person that did that to you or allowed this to happen, you could not hear. And it has to be a stranger that has to come into your life and speak to you. So this is also another aspect that I really want us to, you know, people to pay attention. when things happen and you see your child changing, like you talk about, listening to those heavy metal music, and I'm sure even the dressing was going with it, like black dressing and all of that. As a society, we tend to quickly judge and to not see that that child is crying for help. And as a parent to pause, even if we don't have the means or the knowledge to approach the child, to bring the conversation, like I said earlier on, and Louisa, you reiterate that while you are talking, try to bring somebody else, but don't just let it go. Mm-hmm. Don't just assume. Don't see the child as just like, acting up. Most of the children, whatever you see them doing, is in a reaction or in response to something that happened.
Absolutely.
Yes, we do have some children that are, they like to play with you, but most of the time when a child is acting out, there is a root cause to it. Now, how are you going to get, to the root cause if you are not able to, if you don't have a close family member, you may need to bring expert. Like Louisa said, those carrying, she was crying for help. She wanted her mom to take her to a specialist, but she couldn't voice it. And the mom didn't understand. We are not here to blame. We are here to really talk about what happened, and also for parents to look at for clues and also ways that they can deal with the issue. Mm-hmm. So Lucy, if you go back in the past, as a mother, what do you wish you could have done differently to protect your daughter, Louisa, and prevent the sexual abuse from happening to her?
See, let me go back a little bit here, Mercy. I wish my parents would have talked to me more about, because, I became a mom at 14. My oldest son was born when I was 14. Louisa was born when I was about to turn 17. So I had really no clue of how to be a parent. My mom didn't talk to me about prevention, nothing, and we see a pattern here. I could tell, I will give after I make these comments, I'm going to give my advice to people, viewing now, what I would have done if I could go back. But see, through all this, I was able to realize why I didn't have a good relationship with my mom. I had the same relationship in a worse matter. Louisa knows how my mom was. So I judged my mom. I was rebellious. We fought. We came to a hate relationship with her. But it was not until my mom was almost dying that she revealed to me that she was abused as a child. Yeah. And it was also a time when I was able to tell her something she never knew, that I was abused also when I was about 4 to 5 years old, when they took me to a movie theater and they sat me in a corner because there was no more space. In those days, we're talking about the 60s, you used to have that guy that used to light the movie theaters for you to go sit down. My dad used extremely thick glasses. He was very protective of me. But for one moment that he lost sight of me, thinking she's very close to me, I'm keeping an eye, he didn't see that guy was raping me and holding my mouth. And he was raping me in the darkness. So that opened me up to have fear of men, fear of darkness, and lots of fears, that insecurities that led me to make all the mistakes I made. My mom abused, I was abused. My mom didn't know how to deal with her pain, so she became controlling, extremely. Like Louisa said, she had an issue of controlling. My mom had that issue. And on the other hand, I was controlled. And for me, it was a reverse. I was extremely controlled by other people in my actions all the time. And I went through a domino effect of the abuse, because it's a spiritual thing that happened to me. That men who abused me allow a spirit that was trying to pass to my generation to come into my generation. And unfortunately, it went and I touched my daughter too. But, I am, what would I say? keep your eyes open, keep your kids in a close, I see Luisa, I see my daughters, and I see my daughters-in-law, how they are very protective. I always talk to them. We all talk. We have an amazing relationship as a family. We all talk to each other, and they don't keep an eye away from their kids, Even people that we trust, and we might say, oh, these are good people, I'm gonna leave my kids with them. Truly, we don't know what it could happen. So we have to be extremely careful, truly, Mercy, you come from a country that is the third world, and even family members, even here in the United States, it happens. Family members could have issues, So I would say keep an eye on your kids. Talk to your kids about, what is right and what is wrong, what it should be, if somebody tells you something, talk to me. Don't be afraid to tell me what's going on. I didn't have that liberty of talking to my mom about. It was my mom. My mom died in 2015. We talk about this in about probably 2012. So imagine almost 50 years later, my mom figured out in crying that she lost control of me one moment with my father, and I was totally marked for my whole life. So if people are listening right now, I just want to say, you have the power of breaking generational evil spirits to pass through your generations by standing, by letting go of the past, by being able to release those abusers and forgive them. For me, it opened up that guy was just an opening for many abuse that came afterwards from other family members. I'm not gonna go into details, but seeing when Luisa tells me, I was abused, all this came into my mind. Oh my God, what happened to me is happening to my daughter, and later finding on my mom's deathbed that she was the harsh woman she was, because she had all that load that she was never ever able to let go. She let it go with my husband, as my husband helped her to forgive, and I'm like, okay, Lord, you have empowered us now with Jesus Christ to even love our enemies, love our abusers, be able to release them into the Lord and say, Lord, work with them. Prayers work. Pray for your kids. Even if you're in a situation right now when you see a child that you don't have a relationship, you might not know what happened with that child. Pray that God will use somebody. Usually it's not gonna be us. We want to be the fixers. Moms, we want to be the fixers, In my humanity, I wanted to fix the relationship with Luisa. And the Lord kept me back and said, trust me. Believe in me. Pray and wait. See what I can do if you're willing to wait. And I saw the Lord work in Luisa. And I see how she takes care of her beautiful daughters and how healthy my granddaughters are, and the potential they have to impact this future world that I might not see it, but for Christ. So that would be my recommendation, is pray at all times for your children, but be very vigilant of who is around them, even if it's people that you trust. And and if your kids don't want to go places, don't force them to go, because that's maybe the place where the abuser is, and that's what your kid is trying to tell you now.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy. We are at the first segment of our talk show of today, Rising from Childhood Victim of Sexual Abuse to Children's Advocate, a deep daughter-mother conversation. We will come back with to you next week with the second segment, where we'll go more into details on how you could equip your children to self-advocate. Thank you so much for watching us, and we will see you next week. I am going to stop it, and then we can finish up quick.